This is the developing story this Saturday. The State Capture Commission is not taking former President Jacob Zuma's latest court bid lying down. The Commission has filed papers opposing Zuma's application to have his 15-month sentence rescinded. Zuma launched his last-minute attempt to avoid jail as a deadline for him to hand himself over draws ever so closer. His supporters, meanwhile, have vowed to remain at his side all the way to the bitter end. Our politics desk is closely monitoring developments. Live for us in KZN. Let's take you there live now. Bring in politics editor Nkandla, politics senior reporter Zondo, as well as Linda Mnisi, who are stationed at various parts of Nkandla, including next to the former president's homestead. And I want to begin with you, Sbu, because we are hearing that this ANC KZN delegation has arrived in that part of the country. What is the objective of the trip?
That's correct, Tembegile. The ANC's provincial leadership is led by their chairperson and the provincial secretary, Dumiseni Ntuli, and the chairperson being Success Galala. I understand they are inside the former president's homestead. They arrived here separately in the morning. Obviously, their being here would be perhaps part of the ANC's attempt to try and avoid a hostile situation, rather, or a situation that gets out of hand, as there are some of the supporters of the former president who are out here. I'm sure as I'm talking to you, Tembegile, you can hear some slogans being shouted behind me. Yes, and those are members or purported members of the MKMVA, and I use the word purported because the ANC's National Executive Committee accepted a decision to disband the MKMVA. So I guess then, as things stand, there is no MKMVA, but nevertheless they are members who identify themselves as MKMVA and by extension as members of the ANC. And yes, now when I crossed in the morning it was a bit quiet out here, but right now there is a hive of activity around here, including those members in military fatigues who are marching up and down here. And I guess, Tembegile, that is why the ANC leadership is here, and that is also why the NEC meeting was postponed this weekend, given the fact that they would rather have some NEC members out here to try and avoid a rather tense situation that may unfold. Tembegile. And
you speak of avoiding a tense situation, but the KZN ANC has been quite clearly at the former president's side. Even when at NEC level he was being rebuked for some of his behavior and his attitude and posturing. You wonder then if leaders at national level, at Luthuli House, and those at provincial level are pulling in the same direction on this issue.
Look, Tembegile, the reality is that there was a central decision that was taken by the National Executive Committee to say that any ANC leader or any ANC member who is in court, if supporters, if his friends or their supporters want to go there, they cannot go there in the name of the ANC. But then there was a special request that was made by the ANC's leadership in KwaZulu-Natal, insofar as the former president Jacob Zuma is concerned. They told the NEC that the situation in KwaZulu-Natal is slightly different, in that there may be some people who may want to hijack Jacob Zuma's legal woes, or rather the platform that it affords them for their own political ends, to reach their own narrow self-interest. So rather than have a free-for-all where anyone can put up a stage, a platform, and then insult the leadership of the ANC, they would rather control it as the leadership of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal. That's also why we saw over the last two appearances of the former president at the Pietermaritzburg High Court, there was the provincial leadership of the ANC that was there to support him, but also to control the program. And I guess that is also the point here, Tembegile, where they would rather not want to have this situation get out of hand. And also, as you would know, that there may be members here who identify themselves as MKMVA, but this is not a military outfit where there is a commander that anyone can point to who would take someone's orders, I would imagine. So rather, rather, if they identify themselves as ANC members, I imagine for a Sihlezi Galala and Mtumiseni Ntuli, it's for them to say that they must then be able to provide that leadership. And also, I guess that's also why the ANC's NEC has taken that similar stance to say rather they would have a high-ranking delegation with members like Begicele, who doubles up, as we know, as a police minister, but also Nosiviwe Mapisa Nkandla, who not only is an NEC member, but is also the Minister of Defense. So you can understand why they would deploy those kind of people here, because as that clock continues to tick, Thembekile, today is a day, it's only exactly 1 day away from the deadline for the former president to hand himself over to either the Nkandla police station or the Johannesburg Central Police Station. And if he does not do that by tomorrow, then the law enforcement agencies have 3 days by which they have to either pick him up from here or rather take him to jail, basically.
So very strategic choices by the ANC as far as the national leaders who are coming to KZN. Ziyanda Ngcobo, let's bring you in, senior reporter here at Newsroom Africa. And Ziyanda, I want to talk to you about the legal aspects to the story, because this is what is at the core. And we're hearing this afternoon that the State Capture Commission will in fact file its own papers in Zuma's bid to try and avoid jail.
Absolutely, Thembekile, and one of the interesting things here within the legal fraternity, one of the questions that needs to be answered is whether or not the Pietermaritzburg High Court even has the jurisdiction, so to speak, Thembekile, to actually halt or stay the arrest of former President Jacob Zuma. That matter is going to be heard on Tuesday, and this will be within the 72 hours then that the police need to arrest former President Jacob Zuma. Therefore, it's quite clear then, judging from the legal process, that the former president does not have an intention to hand himself over tomorrow, which is when then that particular deadline will actually lapse. So Tuesday, that matter will be before the courts. But of course, Thembekile, earlier on this week, we know that the Constitutional Court ruled that he should be jailed for 15 months. Yesterday, he filed papers seeking then in Section 42 of the Uniform Rules of the Constitution to actually seek a rescission, which is basically to try and overturn a Constitutional Court judgment. And I stand to be corrected, but this is not something that's happened previously, Thembekile. And so this will be an interesting case when it comes to the jurisprudence of the country, because one, in that particular act, it expresses quite distinctly, Thembekile, the circumstances under which you can actually see this rescission. And I want to go through it because within the particular applicable legal framework, you know, the court, it's only when an order of judgment erroneously sought or erroneously granted in the absence of any affected party, or B, if an order of judgment in which there is an ambiguity or patent error or omission, but only to the extent of such ambiguity, error or omission, or C, Thembekile, if an order or judgment granted as a result of a mistake common to the parties. Now, this mistake common to the parties will become critical, because then the State Capture Commission, in its responding papers, would actually also have to agree then with Zuma's legal team that there was some kind of a mistake or omission that was made. And we know the standpoint of the Commission has been that it has tried various avenues to try and get the former president to appear before it, issuing summons, which he breached, going straight to the Constitutional Court in December last year, and still being unsuccessful in getting him to come to those sittings between the 15th and 19th of February. Interestingly enough, Thembekile, in the papers that were filed by the former president, in which he says he's distancing himself from the statements that have been made by the foundation in his name. We know then that a part of that constitutional ruling spoke about these statements on the unwarranted attacks on the judiciary, on the commission, and that was part of the arguments being made by the commission to say that they cannot allow for the judiciary to be dragged into political mudslinging, and for its integrity to and legitimacy to come into question. So this is where we are when it comes to the legal proceedings, Tembegile.
Siyanda Ngobo, hang tight for me as well. Let's go to Linda Mnisi. Linda, you've been in Nkandla for several days now, and we've seen a gathering over these past few days of Zuma supporters who are saying, well, some of them in fact saying they're willing to lay down their lives to prevent his arrest. Are we still seeing a larger or as large of a showing there?
Well, Tembegile, the week here in Nkandla has been characterized by gunshots, breaking of COVID-19 regulations, and of course, the support for the former president. Now, as the clock ticks, what we're seeing is a bit of movement here in Nkandla, just a couple of people setting up stalls, but the sound that you're hearing from behind me is, of course, some of Amabuto. We saw them early this week arriving in numbers here outside the former president's home, but also what we're able to see is, of course, the stage that has been set up there. We're told that there will be a program that will start just early in the afternoon where some of the supporters will be addressing the other supporters who will be gathered here. Yesterday, Tembegile, we were told about a human shield that would be formed outside the former president's home, and one wonders how that could be done if, for example, the police come to arrest the former president here at his Nkandla home. How would it then be within the confines of the law? But of course, we received backlash for asking those questions. But as things stand right now, there is, of course, some indication that there will be some supporters coming to the former president's house.